Hey everybody, what's going on? Bahroo here, back inside of Borderlands, the pre-sequel, and today we're going to be taking a look at some of Aurelia's skill trees, which were recently leaked out. Now, I will say before we go into these that these are super working in progress. Like, they're not even, there's not even icons for these skills, so anything is subject to change at this point. So this first skill tree that we're going to be taking a look at is called Are You Being Served? And this skill tree revolves using your teammates as basically your servants throughout the entire thing. If you are a solo player, I would recommend giving this entire skill tree a miss because it is very co-op dependent. And you're not going to have a real good time unless you have other players with you. But if you do have a friend that you would just like to make your servant and just carry them around Pandora, this is for you, and it's perfect. Anyway, let's just go ahead and start jumping into what exactly the skill tree has to offer in its current state. As I said, everything is subject to change, but let's just go ahead and take a look at it. Anyway, the first skill that we're going to be taking a look at is called Duchess. Killing an enemy grants you a stack of Duchess. You gain increased accuracy for each stack of Duchess that you have. All stacks are lost upon either the death of you or your servant. Now, we'll take a look at what being a servant means here in a second, and it's actually the key to this entire skill tree in general. But before we do, let's go ahead and move on to the other side of this here and see what all it has to offer. And that one being Valet. When your servant kills an enemy, you gain a stack of Valet. You and your servant gain bonus reload speed based on the number of Valet stacks that you currently have. Now, it doesn't say that you ever lose these stacks, but I'm going to assume that you obviously lose them whenever you or your servant die. And you can see you can get a pretty significant amount of Valet stacks, increasing your reload speed, which is nice. It would have been nice to have sort of a damage buff kind of early on, but having this is not too terribly bad. But let's go ahead and take a look at what exactly the whole servant and master portion of this is all about. So now let's talk about servant and master, and this is all going into the indentured servitude skill. So what this is whenever you press and hold the melee button, you will offer up a contract similar to Claptrap's High Five to another player. If the other player accepts this contract by meleeing you again, similar to just doing a duel, then he/she becomes your servant and you become his/her master. The contract ends when one of you dies. You deal increased damage with all gun types when you have a servant, and your servant will gain a little bit of increased shield capacity. So this is a nice little damage buff, but again, you are going to need to be in a multiplayer environment to even get any of these buffs, which is why I said you should really give this entire skill tree a miss if you are just in a solo environment. But having a nice little damage buff there is pretty cool, and I like the fact that you can actually recruit your team members to help you in an interesting way. And you're going to see throughout, as we keep going down the skill tree, there's going to be a lot of different buffs with you and your teammate helping each other out. It's not like Handsome Jack's skill tree where you basically just try and fuck over the other teammate the entire time. Granted, I love that skill tree. It doesn't have too much in the way of actual synergy. So let's go ahead and make our way down to the second tier and see what that has to offer. So starting off the second tier of skills, we've got Protect Your Assets, which is a survivability upgrade that you can pick up pretty early. It's pretty standard stuff, 20% maximum shield capacity to you, which is a good amount, especially if we do have a class mod that ends up buffing it, and an extra 15% maximum health. Your servant is going to get 15% capacity and 5% maximum health. Not really too much to say in terms of anything else, because it's just a pretty cut and dry survivability upgrade, but I don't know if we'll be putting points in this because it's pretty small for the amount of points you got to put into it. Anyway, let's go ahead and take a look at the other side before we look at Tier 2's Game Changer. So the other side of this Tier 2 is that you will have quality, not quantity, which is a very interesting skill, might I add. Basically, you will get increased damage and fire rate for all guns that you use that are above blue quality. Aurelia does not associate with shit tier guns. In fact, anything that is green quality or worse, she actually gets a penalty on. So you're going to reduce your gun damage and fire rate by 5% for anything green or lower, but get an increase of 15% damage and fire rate for anything that is blue or higher. So blue, purple, legendary, and if they add anything above legendary, pearlescent, then you will get buffs for those. Anyway, let's go ahead and take a look at that game changer now. So for our first game changer, we have You First. When you or your servant suffers health damage, it is instead dealt to your partner shield if available. So if you take some damage, it'll go to your partner shield, which is really good synergy with, say, a melee Athena or something like that. And if they take damage, which is not that great, it will now go to your shield. So it could also hinder your survivability. But something that's interesting, any damage dealt to you that would otherwise force you into fight for your life will instead be dealt to your servant, unless she is in fight for your life. So if your servant is just a tanky Wilhelm that's constantly regenerating their shield, then they will never die and you will never die, because anything that would have put you in fight for your life will instead be dealt to them. I can see a lot of griefing happening between friends of just Aurelia jumping in front of a rocket launcher and putting their friends in fight for their life. I know that's what I'm going to do. Anyway, let's go ahead and make our way down to that third tier now. Solid second tier. The first tier was not that great, but a very solid second tier. Let's move on to the third one. So for our third tier, we have a game changer called Excellent Shot, Madam. When your servant shoots an enemy, they become set up. If you shoot them after they are set up, you will consume it and deal additional damage. This damage is considered normal, so no elements are attached to it, and this damage is also based on your level. You may only trigger Excellent Shot, Madam, once every few seconds, and every few seconds is considered about somewhere around 6 to 8 seconds, depending on the skill. Now, what this will do is give you a little bit of extra damage between you and your partner. However, this is a skill that doesn't have a set amount of, it's not percentage based on your gun or anything like that. It's based off your level, and that can be very, very hit or miss. There are a lot of skills in the pre-sequel or in Borderlands in general that suffer from not having, like, scaling with your guns or things like that. So this could be a good skill, or this could be a terrible skill. We won't really know until we actually play with the character and see how well the scaling is from early game to late game. Because some of them are good in late game, some of them are good in early game, others are just shit. Anyway, let's go ahead and move on to that fourth tier now. So starting off our fourth tier, we have Next to Cleanliness. This will increase your damage and reload speed with all guns that are not incendiary, corrosive, or explosive damage. Rip Torg and most of Malawan. So basically, you're going to want to stick to Jacobs, or you're going to want to stick to cryo and shock weaponry, which is good considering some of the best weapons in the game are both shock and cryo, so that'll be nice for your character here. This skill, while in itself doesn't have too much going for it, will have a lot of synergy with the middle skill tree that centers around a lot of cryo damage, as well as turning your actual guns into cryo themselves. So you're going to want to pretty much have a shock-based build when using this skill here. Overall, pretty good damage bonus, but I don't know if it's going to honestly be worth not using incendiary, explosive, or corrosive just for this tiny little bit of, just for this tiny little buff. Either way, let's take a look at Tier 4's Game Changer. So for the Game Changer on the fourth tier is called All Glory to the Master. When you kill an enemy who was damaged by your servant, which has pretty good synergy with Excellent Shot, Madam, you gain 1 stack of glory, or rather, you convert a stack of Duchess and Valet into a stack of glory. When you get this stack of glory, you will get increased critical hit damage for each stack of glory that you have, losing all of them, obviously, when you die. Now, this will stack up to 500 times, giving the Master 100% critical and the Servant 50% critical. Now, for a 1-point investment, getting 100% passive critical bonus is really nice. But one thing you have to realize is that this will take a ridiculous amount of time to stack up. First, your servant has to hurt them, then you have to finish them off. You will need to repeat this 500 times before you can actually get the full benefit of this. So, for a 1-point investment, it is okay at best. Really not that great for a tier 4 skill, but if you're doing a long play session, I would recommend picking it up, I guess. But it'll be a while before you actually fully cap this out. And Gearbox, you know, if you're watching, I recommend changing this to 50 stacks and not 500 stacks. That would be great. You know, that would be good. It's not good in its current state. Definitely change it to like 50 stacks, be a little bit better. Yeah. Anyway, let's go ahead and keep moving our way through this skill tree here. So for our final tier 4 skill, we have Keep Your Chin Up. Killing an enemy causes your servant to gain health. When your servant kills an enemy, you gain health. This health increase will be 9.5% of his or hers, you know, alternate maximum health values. So you basically can just give each other health by killing enemies, which is really nice because even if you are, say, in a downed state, then if you kill an enemy, your friend will still get health, and when they get back up, they'll come back with, say, 50% health instead of 33% health, or however many enemies you end up killing while they're in that down state, because your health can actually be restored in a down state. So definitely a good tier 4 skill to pick up. Would recommend, especially considering the other one penalizes you for using different elements, and I like variety in my skill build, so I'd probably go with Keep Your Chin Up if you're gonna pick up a skill. Anyway, let's go ahead and look at tier 5 now. Alright, so for our first tier 5 skill, we have something that's so work in progress, I have no idea what it does. Improves your shield recharge rate by a rate of potato, and your fire rate goes up by bread. The lower your health, the greater the bonus. Solid skill. Can't even commentate it because it's so, yeah. This thing it increases your stats by potato. It's a good skill. Let's go see if the other one's like that too. So for our other tier 5 skill and our last skill before we look at the game changer here, we have Save the Queen, which is an amazing quote. A quote. We have a quote. There cannot be any more quote. I like that. It's good. Anyway. So what this is when you get attacked by a melee strike, or rather the master gets attacked by a melee strike, they will get marked with Save the Queen. If the servant will then damage that marked enemy, they will suffer cryo damage and probably get frozen. This damage is going to be based off the master's level and how many points they have in here. Again, this is another skill that could potentially suck because it does not have set in stone scaling and instead scales with your level. Some of these are really good. For example, Nisha's Unforgiven is ridiculously strong and scales perfectly with her level. There are some others, however, that do not. I'm looking at you, Bloodlust. I'm looking at you. Anyway, with that all out of the way, it's a pretty good synergy, but the only downside to it is that you have to actually get meleeed, and it's not that hard to avoid getting meleeed. So I don't see too much in the way of this being used. Instead, I'm probably going to go spec into the skill that increases my potato fire rate and bread shield capacity. Anyway, let's go and take a look at our capstone here and see what it has to offer. So for our capstone for Aurelia, Are You Being Served skill tree, we have a backhand to remember, a melee override. Pressing the melee key to perform a backhand to remember. Enemies are knocked back and suffer cryo damage. Allies are suddenly highly motivated and gain increased movement speed, reload speed, and aim speed. Also, if any of your motivated allies kills an enemy, it will trigger all of your on-kill skills. So this is literally a bitch slap. Her capstone is a bitch slap, and I love it. And what is good about this is that it continues that synergy with your your servants doing all the killing for you. If they get a kill, you will get all of your on-kill skills. And I would assume, but I can't really confirm, that if you have this buff going and they're highly motivated and you take a knee and you're in fight for your life and they get a kill, I would assume that would also proc a kill for you, getting you a second wind. So that's all pretty good. Overall, this skill tree seems pretty solid, and it's a great time for a two-player sort of co-op environment. I would really like to see Aurelia and Handsome Jack as master-servant combo. I'm sure it would lead to a lot of what the fuck moments and just a lot of general fucking each other over, considering that the Aurelia skill tree is basically based around supporting each other, and the Handsome Jack skill tree is based around fucking each other over. So it's a great time for it's fun for the whole family. Just like that snowball grenade. Anyway, that is pretty much gonna wrap it up for this video here today. I hope you all enjoyed this in-depth skill tree look at for Aurelia the Baroness. I will be making videos on her other two skill trees. I just like to always take an in-depth look at these skills. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button, help support me in what I do, and do not forget to subscribe for future content. That's going to be it for this video, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Later.